Okay, so let's get started with the first question. So this question was pretty basic. It just simply asks you to look for individual texts. And we just put it there to show you that we put some effort into making various types of references available. Now, all of these work in the central search normally. Or you can go through the LDAB page. So the central search is on our home page, and we've tried to make this a kind of Google-like search interface to give you easy access to our data. Alternatively, you could go through the LDAB page itself, which is in the top right corner and which gives you the advanced search options. So if you're looking for a text and you're using the LDAB number, it is important when using the central search on the home page that you add LDAB before the number. Because if you add just the number, then it's interpreted as the TM number. Now, all texts in the LDAB also have a TM number, but it's not the same number as the LDAB number. So if you would just enter 1200, so which is the first text you need to search for in the first question, you would go to TM 1200, which is not a literary text. So if you want to find the LDAB number 1200, you have to add LDAB before it, because the computer obviously doesn't know that you mean an LDAB number. So if you enter LDAB 1200, you're brought to the detail page for that text. So the text ID, the TM number for this text is 60,086. And then you'll also see alternative designations that are used for this text. In this case, it's a text that's also in Mertensbach. So we add the Mertensbach number there as well. Sometimes if a text is really well known and is known by a name, it's also mentioned here. We'll see some examples of that later on. And then the detail page contains further information on things like when the text is dated, where it was written, where it was found, the language it's written in, the material it's written on, and then some information about the book, the author who wrote the book, what we call culture and genre. So culture are the four broad categories we use in the LDAB. It's science, literature, arts, and religion. And then genre are kind of subcategories that we use as well. And what's also interesting is here is the more info section, because it contains links to other projects that also present information about this text. So in this case, there's a link to the Digital Corpus of Literary Papyri and 2 links to the Mertensbach database. And then on the right part of the screen, you get some information about the publications for the text. If we have information about a photograph, we add that as well, and some extra information. And we also tried to add where the text is preserved today. So here, this one is in Oxford, in the Sackler Library. Now for literary texts, the lower part of the page will normally be empty because we don't really have the full text for literary texts. But sometimes we do offer information about people mentioned in the text, places mentioned in the text. For this one, it's not the case, but again, we will see other examples later. So that's a very, very easy search. Same goes for the next part of the first exercise. So TM 59,004, you just give in TM 59,004 on the home page, and you're brought directly to the detail page. We also use, like I said, we use other abbreviations as well. So the next one, 5Q12, is an abbreviation system used for Dead Sea Scrolls. So if you enter that one, again, you see the results. And here you can see, for example, that this text is also known as the Damascus document, 5Q Damascus document. So we add that information here as well. There are no people here either. And again, with more information about the text, it's in Hebrew. This particular one is written on parchment, and some more information. It's considered to be a science text with religious law, and there's more information on the website of the Dead Sea Scrolls. So like I said, we also use names for texts if texts are known by names. So if you would enter the great Isaiah scroll, this takes a little longer because, well, the computer has to interpret 4 words. You'll see that you're brought to a second page where it tries to interpret the different parts of the string. And you'll see that Great Isaiah Scroll is identified as a text with this name. The is interpreted as a place name because apparently when you go to the detail page for this text, we don't have the Great Isaiah Scroll, we just have Great Isaiah Scroll. So that's why he tries to offer an interpretation for the, and apparently it corresponds to a place in Egypt. And that's why you get 0 results, because there is no result in the database that corresponds to Great Isaiah Scroll found in Egypt. But it isn't really a problem here because you can just click on Great Isaiah Scroll and then you're brought to the correct page here. You may have noticed, but the new feature we've added this year, it's generally something we post on Facebook, is our TM Gallery, where we kind of highlight a different text each week. And these are texts that generally have a Wikipedia page. So here you also have the link to Wikipedia. So if you go over the picture, you get kind of an enlarged thumbnail, but you can also click on it to go to the picture in Wikipedia. And if you hover over the information button, you get a short description of this text. We've added this just, to draw some attention to the website and the different texts we have for the general public, to make it more interesting for the general public as well. The next one is the very enigmatic 6K7. This brings you to a Peshitta text here. Again, all the usual information, the date, the provenance, language, material, and so on. And this text, you can go to the DCLP for extra information. Then SA 218 also gives a result. Here we have a little more information. There are some more publications here. What's also interesting is that for older publications that don't really have any copyright anymore, we've been trying to add links to online PDFs. So if you see a small PDF icon here next to one of the publications, you can see who contributed the link, but if you click on it, you'll be brought to mostly to archive.org, where the book in question is kept, and then you can scroll through the book to find the right passage, and should make it easier we hope it makes it easier to look up publications, especially in times like these when not all libraries are open. So we're trying to add as many links as possible to publications as well. Okay, and then P82. It doesn't really matter if you type capital letters or not, so the algorithm knows how to interpret them. So here you see that this is a New Testament manuscript, the Lucas, one of the Lucas texts. And again, well, it's the usual information that you see here. So as you can see, it's fairly easy to find individual texts. We try to put as many abbreviations and whatever in there, so you can basically type almost anything and you'll get a result. Then we have the Cologne Archilochus. Yes. Again, it's a name, so it takes a little more time. As you can see, he doesn't interpret the whole string, so the Cologne Archilochus, but the words are interpreted individually. Again, if you click on this one, oh yeah, that's right. No, so this is to demonstrate that we don't have all names yet. So like I said, we're trying to add as many names for texts as possible, but in this case, we don't have the name, the Cologne Archilochus yet. So yeah, so if you click on Archilochus here, you just get the author, not an actual text. But you do get all the attestations of the works by the author in the table below here. So that should help you on your way as well. If you know of certain names for text and you can't find them in our database, you're always welcome to send us an email so we can add them and we can make the searches more user-friendly. So in this case, it's something we still need to add, which we'll do after the workshop, of course, but we needed an example to show you. Then there's Hyanthe 220. Yes, that's right. This is another example of something that doesn't yet work. Well, it works because in our system it's converted to not only the author's name but also the publication itself. So here below in the table you'll see the results, and if you just click on the TM number, then you'll be brought to the correct page. So we don't always, the standard identifiers that we use are not always the identifiers to find the publication, so we try to convert them as much as possible. So you will be brought to the correct page anyway, which is the case here. And here you also see some information that this is actually a text that has been joined with 3 other texts. So the TM numbers 62392, 62461, and 62504, they don't exist anymore. These texts have all been merged under 62448. But the information is still available in case older publications perhaps still use these numbers. We don't throw them away. Likewise, you can see here under note, you can see the old LDAB numbers. So we keep track of those when we merge texts in order that people who still have the old numbers, that they don't get lost, that they're always redirected to the correct page in this case. Okay, and then the final one this is, again, another example of what doesn't really work. And that's because, so if you type in Mertensbach 2137, it doesn't work. It doesn't suggest any matches either. But that's because they have a very strict numbering system. So they add zeros before their numbers. And we really have to follow their strict numbering system because otherwise it doesn't work. So it's something you'll have to keep in mind that when you're looking for Mertensbach texts, you have to use the number precisely that they give. So in this case, you have to add a 0 before, and then a dot and 3 zeros after. And, oh, no. Again. What was it, 2 zeros? No. I seem to have written down the wrong number. I'm so sorry for this. Is it this? So you can see Mertensbach can be very complicated.
2137.
Oh, sorry, I made a typo. Okay, yeah.
Huh?
And then the 0 before, probably. Is it this? Yes, okay. So you can see it's very complicated. You have to get the number precisely right. But if you do, you're brought to the detail page again. And then, well, here you have the link to Mertensbach, where you have their complicated numbering system as well. Thank you, Willy, for that. Okay, so that's how you can look for individual text. So, like I said, in most cases, it's pretty straightforward. And if there are names or abbreviations that are not yet in our database and you think they should be, feel free to drop us a line and let us know. Okay, so for the second question. Can you find manuscripts predating AD 800 of works dealing with veterinary medicine? So this is a question which has two variables in it. So first of all, you need texts predating AD 800, and you need texts dealing with veterinary medicine. And so for that, the easiest thing to do is to go to the LDAB page where you have the advanced search form. Let's see. Someone got kicked out of the meeting apparently, so I'm going to try to let her back in. Okay. Yeah, so you need to enter two variables here. So we've, to make things easier, because of course it's not always very straightforward to know which keywords we use, we've added these info buttons next to each search field, which gives you an idea of the range of things you can fill in there. And so like if you're looking for a genre, because in this case veterinary medicine will be a genre, you can click on the info button and then you get a list of all possible keywords that we have in the LDAB. Now we have all, they're sorted alphabetically. So here you see at the very end you have veterinary. So if you click on it, it's automatically filled in the search field. So you don't even have to type anything, you can just click on it. And you can also, if you want to, but I'm not sure if it's necessary here with veterinary, but if you want, you can also add the keyword medicine. Again, just click on it and it's added in the genre field. Now, if you add two search terms just like that, it automatically interprets this as a search using the Boolean combination AND. So if you want to combine two search terms, you don't need to write AND. The AND is implied. We'll do a later exercise where you can search with or not, and so you'll see how that works later. But so if you want to combine two search terms, you don't need to add the AND. You can just add veterinary and medicine in the same field, and it works. Then the date. So you want all texts predating 800. Actually, strictly speaking, you don't have to enter anything in the field here, since our database is more or less constricted to AD 800. If you want, you can, of course. Again, if you click on the info button next to date, you get some suggestions on how you can enter dates. The first box shows more or less specific dates. The second box shows how you can enter date ranges. It's also very important that you take a look at the third box, because these are ways of entering dates that do not work yet. So it's important that that you look at that. So if you want to enter a date here, you can just simply type BC 800 / AD 800, and then it'll take the whole range. And then if you click on search, then you get your result page. So the date of the text here, as you can see, is interpreted from 1st of January 800 BC to the 31st of December AD 800. There's the genre veterinary, the genre medicine, and because you were searching in the LDAB search form, it is also added as a criterion. So the computer knows I only need to go look at texts that are in the LDAB. And then the result is 3 texts, and you can see them here listed below with some basic information. And if you want to look at one of the specific texts, you can just click on the TMID, and it again brings you to the detail page of this text. So that's the solution to question number 2. For question number 3, we'll go back to the LDAB page, to the search form. Can you find Greek texts in the LDAB that were edited during World War II? So the first search criterion here is that the texts are written in Greek. So for that, you'll need the language search field. Again, you can click on the info button, and a list is loaded of all the languages that we have in Trismegistos. As you can see, it can be very elaborate, so we have texts that are written in Akkadian, Elamite, hieroglyphic, and Old Persian. We have various Arabian dialects, Arabic, Coptic. So you can scroll through that to see what you're looking for, but here, since we just need Greek, you can also just type Greek. And then the second criterion is that they were edited during World War II. Now, you can't just use date for this, because the field for date means the date when the text was written. For the edition date, we have a separate field that's more to the bottom of the list. So here, edition date. Unfortunately, just typing WW2 doesn't work. You need to type actual years. So depending on what your idea is of when World War II was, I'd say 1939 to 1945 for the date range. And then again, you can click on search. Again, here you get the interpretation of your search. So Greek, the language of the text. You're searching in the LDAB, so that's also a criterion. And then the publication range is between 1939 and 1945. And then you'll see that we have 351 texts that answer to these criteria. The first 5 results are listed in the table below. If you want to see the whole list of results, you click on the 351, and then you get this kind of detail page which with some basic statistics. So it shows you that most of the texts edited between 1939 and 1945 are Greek texts. There are some bilingual Coptic Greek, some Greek Latin, some Sahidic Greek, and so on. Most of these texts are written on papyrus. Some were written on parchment, some on pottery, some on wood. And here you see the date range of these texts, but here it's the date of when the texts were written, of course. And you can filter these graphs by for the pie charts by clicking on the relevant sections. And for the chronological overview, you can filter by using the drop-downs here. And if you filter them, your results table below is also adapted. So this is the list of all 351 texts that answer to your criteria. You may notice that if you, I'm not sure if it's visible in this one, that sometimes these texts will have publication numbers. So this is 1939 here, for example. So you search for texts that were edited or published between 1939 and 1945, but here all of a sudden you see, well, this is Journal of Philology of 1893. That's not within the date range that I asked for. But that's because what we show here is what we consider to be the standard publication. This doesn't mean that it's the only publication. So this text was probably re-edited during, well, should be re-edited during World War II, otherwise it wouldn't pop up in the list. But the primary publication in our database is still the Journal of Philology of 1893. So that explains that the dates are not always, like here, for example, you have Chronique d'Égypte 2017. This is a more recent publication, but it doesn't mean that that this is the first publication. So the text was probably published first during World War II and then was republished or at least part of it was republished in 2017. Now, another way to find these texts is if you go back to the LDAB menu, you have a heading here called Recent Editions. Now, this is a bit misleading because it doesn't only show recent editions, but it basically allows you to search for publications from a particular year. We created it to provide an overview of recent editions, but it actually works for the whole database. So in this case, you can also more or less solve this question by using this table and the filter bar above this table. So you can, since we were looking for Greek texts, you can select Greek here, and then wait till the page is reloaded. The discipline is already set to LDAB. And then here you can also change the dates, and you can say, I want text from 1939 to 1945, or publications. And then you specifically get the volumes that were published between these years. And here, the last row, it says how many texts they contained. So yeah, then you get an overview. This is more strict than, well, it's a different way of looking for the texts. It's than the other way. So this is an alternative. Okay, so that was question number 3. Number 4. How many literary papyri were edited by Vitelli, and did he edit other texts as well? Again, so we'll go to the LDAB page. So the editor is Vitelli. So we need the editor field here. As for the other fields as well, if you click on the info button, you get a list of all possible editors that we have. It's a very, very long list, so if it's an editor with a Z, you're going to have to scroll down. But again, you can also just type the name, so Vitelli. And since we're looking for papyri, you'll have to also enter papyri here for material. Again, here for material, we have a list of keywords. This is specifically for the LDAB, the types we have. And sometimes we have like extra specifications. So these are things you can, so for example, an ostrakhan is always defined as stone in our database, but also as ostrakhan. So you can add that as well if you're looking for that. But so in this case, we're looking for papyri. And this gives us 108 results. Again, the first 5 are listed here. And if you click on the 108, again, you get an overview. So most of the literary papyri Vitelli edited were written in Greek. There were some bilingual Greek-Latin, some Coptic Greek. Oh, so as you can see, if you click on it, the results are filtered. That's just one text in this case. And all of them are obviously on papyrus because that was one of our search criteria. And these texts are mainly Roman period texts that he edited. And then here below, you get the list of all the 108 literary papyri. So the second part of the question is, did he edit other texts as well? So not only literary papyri. And for this, you actually want a general overview of Vitelli's work. And for that, you need to go to the editor's database, which is, if you're on the home screen, you have the menu here on the right. If you scroll down, you have editors. Then again, you get the whole list alphabetically, just typing Vitelli's name, and then you're brought to his detail page with some information. If we know when a person was born and died, we try to add it. We see that in total he edited 815 texts, of which only 108 literary papyri. So most of the texts he edited were actually documentary texts. And you see here to the right, you can see a kind of chronological overview of when he edited all these texts, with some lows in 1919 and 1922. And then here you get an overview for the type of text. So again, the majority of the texts he edited were Greek, on papyrus, and from Egypt. And here too, we see that most of these texts were Roman period texts, only some Ptolemaic texts that he did. And then below you get the whole list of all texts that he published. Okay. Maybe it's also important to show that these pie charts, they're pretty useful to get an idea of the distribution, but it's not very practical if you want to see what these small categories are. So for that, you can switch to a list view here to the right. So if you just click on list, the screen changes and you get these tables, and then it's much easier to see the smaller categories. So it can be useful if you're interested in that. So then you'll see that out of the 815 texts, 810 were from Egypt, 3 were from Libya, and 2 were from Israel. Now these are modern countries. If you're interested, for example, in Roman provinces, you can switch to Roman provinces. And then you'll see that actually almost everything is from Egypt and only 2 are from outside of Egypt. So, okay. There's a third way to, well, or if you want to look at the question differently and say, okay, so Vitelli edited 108 literary texts, what about those non-literary texts? Then in the central search page, there's a very easy way to do this. You just type in Vitelli, and then you use the not operator and literary. And that gives you 679 texts that are not considered to be literary texts. And then again, if you click on the 679, you get this overview of those texts. So maybe also be important to say that what we mean by literary is what here in this, for this field, culture is designated as literature. So these are the 4 broad categories of the LDAB. So if you type in literary, it's interpreted as the text is literature. If you want to interpret this in the broadest sense, in the sense that I just want all texts edited by Vitelli that are included in the LDAB, whether they're categorized as literature there or not, you can, yeah. So if you click on the plus sign here, you can choose for alternative interpretations. And so if you say, no, I don't just want the text to be designated as literature, I just want all texts in the LDAB, you can choose for this alternative interpretation and just pick this, and then your search is adapted, and then you have all texts edited by Vitelli that are not in the LDAB. And then you see that you have 669 texts. Okay, so for text number 5, I'll go back to the LDAB page. In an article, you find a reference to JB2. Can you find attestations on papyrus for this text and passage? We'll try this in the central search first to see how that works. So if you just type in JB in the central search and then 2, you'll see that he interprets JB as the Bible book Job, but he doesn't interpret the passage. So we have 60 texts that contain Job, but the passage isn't included here. So
Janne?
yeah,
Janne?
yeah.
We horen het niet meer.
Oei.
Janne?
Yeah.
We don't hear you.
Does everyone hear me? Because Willy says he doesn't hear me.
I can hear you. I can hear you.
Okay, Willy, I think it's just you.
Oké, dat is later dan. Ja.
Okay. So yes, if we want to include the passage, you need to go to the LDAB page. And for that, you need to enter JB in the field for ancient author and work. Again, if you click on the information button, you get an overview of all the works we have in the LDAB. And we also have a separate box for Bible books here. And since we are looking for passage number 2, we can enter that in the book and chapter field. And then we see that we have 6 results. Now the book and chapter and the verse fields, if I'm correct, they currently only work for the Bible and for Homer, I think. Willy can correct me if I'm wrong. So it's not implemented for all literary texts yet, but it's something that we are working on for the future. Okay, so that was pretty straightforward. Then question number 6, is the Vetus Latina version of the letter to the Galatians preserved in an ancient manuscript? So for that, we're going to need to enter letter to the Galatians in the LDAB. Now, if you just enter this and you search for it, you'll see that we have 54 texts. Now, as you can see here, he says that letter to the Galatians is not recognized, but Galatians itself is. So he suggests something alternative, but in this case, it's the correct book we're looking for. So we have 54 texts for this. But the question was, well, we want the Vetus Latina version. And for that, again, you can click on the plus sign to get more interpretations, because here, now it's interpreted as Galatians, Bible book, any language. But what we want is here, the Vetus Latina version. So if you click on pick this, again, it does the search, now with the correct search criterion, and you'll see that we have one text here, which is also in our TM gallery, so we have a small picture here, and it's also known as the Freising fragments, the Fragmenta Frisingiana, and so on. So we have quite a lot of information on this text. Okay, question number 7. Back to LDAB. Can you find the oldest attestation of Jeremiah 1.12? Second part is of Jeremiah in general. So again, we go to the author and work field and we type in Jeremiah, and you want book 1, verse 12. And when we search for this, we see that we have one result, and it is a text that is written in Aramaic, and it was found in Egypt in a monastery. Now, the second part of the question is, well, we just want to see what we have for Jeremiah in general, so we just remove the book, or the book, chapter, and the verse fields, and then we just search for Jeremiah, and then we have 72 results. If we click on that, here we'll see distribution. So most of them are written in Latin, 93 are written in Latin, 87 are written in Greek, and 83 in Syriac. Most of them are written on parchment, small part on papyrus. And here you have the chronological distribution of these texts. And then the table below gives all the editions. The oldest was written apparently in the 3rd or 2nd century BC and was found in the Qumran caves. Okay, question number 8. Which language is the numerically most important for attestations of passages from the Gospel according to Mark? Is this similar to the language spread for the Acts of the Apostles from the same period? And what if you look at the two together? So for the first part of the question, we want to see in which language the Gospel according to Mark was written most often. So for that, again, we go to the author and author work search field, and we simply type in Mark. And you press enter. Then you'll see it's interpreted as the Bible book in the LDAB. There are 307 results. But now we want to know in which languages were these texts all written. So you click on the 307, and here you get the pie charts with the distribution. And then we'll see that Latin is the most important chunk with 411 texts, so almost 35%, but it is closely followed by Syriac with 379 texts, some 32%, and then significantly less were written in Greek, and then a lot of smaller languages, which you can discover when you click on the table view. You'll see what these other languages are. Apparently Caucasian Albanian is one of them, a bilingual text in Latin and Old High German, Ethiopian, Georgian, so it's pretty exotic. So for the Gospel of Mark, we have Latin on number 1, Syriac on place number 2, and then Greek, followed by Greek. So, is this similar to the language spread for the Acts of the Apostles? So for that, we simply look for Acts of the Apostles. Again, we get the interpretation here, and you see that there are 133 texts that have the Acts of the Apostles, and if we click on that, we get the distribution here. In this case, Syriac is more dominant, so we have 168 texts, or 33% of the Acts of the Apostles were written in Syriac. Only 110, so only 21% or 22 written in Latin, and again, Greek is in third place. And again, if you switch to table view, you can see the other smaller languages here, which seems to be mostly Coptic. So Latin was more important, or more works of the Gospel according to Mark were written in Latin, while Acts of the Apostles, the majority was written in Syriac. Now, if you want to look at the two together, what you have to do then is actually just combine the two in the author and work field. So we want to see all texts that contain the Gospel of Mark, or, because that's our second search criterion, the Acts of the Apostles. So like I said before, if you're combining search terms and you're using and, this is implied. You don't have to type that in. It's also explained here, by the way, on the right. If you want to add an or criterion, as we're doing here, or a not criterion, then you have to add those explicitly. So like we've done here, so we want Mark or Acts of the Apostles. If you search for the results, you'll see that we have a total of 424 texts. And if we want to look at the distribution, we see that there are 460 of those are written in Syriac and 448 are written in Latin. So there's a very close tie here between these two languages. So then, question number 9. From which period do we have most manuscripts with attestations of women authors? Second part of the question is of Latin women authors, and then which is the best attested one in that last category. Now, since we're working specifically with authors here, the best way to go about this here is not to use the LDAB search page, but the authors page. So if you go back to the home page and you go to the menu here on the right, you'll see our authors section here. So if you click on that, you'll be brought to the authors and the works homepage here. And for this, you don't really have to type in everything because we already have a pie chart for gender here in the middle. Now again, as you can see, the overwhelming majority are men. We've really done our best to find as many women authors as we could for antiquity, but unfortunately there aren't that many. So we have 105 at the moment. If you click on it, the results are filtered. So now you have the 105 female authors. And as you can see, most of them actually wrote in the Hellenistic and early Roman period. So from the 3rd century onwards, they kind of disappear, which is actually pretty interesting because if we go back to the original chart, which includes all authors, regardless of their gender, you'll see that actually in the second half of the 3rd and beginning of the, this is probably the 4th century, yeah. Most authors are actually attested in the late Roman period. So, but that's precisely the period where we don't have a lot of female authors anymore. But I'm going to leave the interpretation of that for others. But so the question was not how many female authors do we have, but how many, from which period do we have the most manuscripts attesting to these female authors? Because it's not because an author lived in the 1st century AD that we also have texts written by him or her that have survived from the 1st century AD, of course. So for this, you'll need to scroll up a bit. And so here we have the number of authors, but here we have, click here for all attestations. And that's what you need for this question. So if you click on here, you go to this multiple authors page, as we have called it, and you get a word cloud of these authors, and then you'll see that, well, Sappho is by far the most popular. And then you'll see that for these 105 authors, we actually only have 55 attestations. That's because we try to add as many authors as possible, but it doesn't mean that all their works are attested between 800 BC and AD 800. So our authors database is far more extensive than our works database. For example, Tacitus, we don't have any attestations for Tacitus because there simply are no manuscripts dated before 800 BC. So, but now, so when are these authors best attested? And then if you look at the weight, the chart with the dates, most of them are attested in the 2nd and 3rd century AD, even though the majority lived in the Hellenistic and early Roman period. Now the second part of the question is, well, what about Latin women authors? So authors that wrote in Latin specifically. For this, we need to go back to the authors page. So we still have the filter here for women, but now we need to also filter on Latin, and then only 16 authors remain. And as you can see here, well, this is more late Hellenistic, early Roman. And then again, if we go back to the attestations, we'll see that Proba is the best attested one, and she was apparently the earliest Christian poet. So her works, we have some works here from the early 8th century and then from the late 8th century. If you click on her name, by the way, or any name here in the word cloud, you're brought to the author page, the detail page for this author. So we have like this close approximation from about when she lived, so probably the first half of the 4th century, the genre which she wrote, and then if we have them, there are links, in this case, like to Wikipedia, to Perseus, and so on. So we try to put as much information in there as well. Okay, and we'll do question 10 and then we'll take a short break. Can you find attestations of Hesiod's work and days? So again, this is a question that focuses on one particular author, so it's best to solve it through the, you can solve it either through the author's page or through the LDAB search page. So either, well, you can go about this in various ways. If you just search for Hesiod here, you'll get an overview. It's of course this Hesiod that we're interested in, which brings you to his detail page that we just also saw for Proba. And then here you have a word cloud with his works. And since we wanted to look for works and days, you can click on Opera et Dies, and then here you get more information about this particular work. And you'll see here that there are 40 attestations of this work, all written in Greek, mostly on papyrus, some on pottery, parchment, or wood, and most were found in Egypt, some in Syria, some in Italy, and some in Libya. And you can see the chronological distribution of these texts here, so most are from the Roman period. And here you have a list of all attestations. But like I said, you can also, there are different ways to solve this question. So instead of typing in the author's name, you can also just type in the work here, the title of the work, and then it brings you directly to the detail page. But you can also use the LDAB for this question. So if you go to the LDAB search form, and then in the author and work field, you type in Hesiod works and days. It also should work, yes. So here you get the interpretation, and then here again you see that there are 40 texts for this work. I should probably add here, yes, you'll see that if you use the LDAB search interface, that works and days is interpreted as Hesiodus opera et dies. That's because our standard designations for an author and for his or her work are the Latin names and the Latin titles. Now in this case we already have the English version of the name, Hesiod, and the English version of the work, works and days. But we don't have that for all texts yet, but we're trying to get that done as well. Since these days more and more people use the English version, we're adding those to the database as well. As you can see, if we have it, it's automatically converted to what our standard version is in the database. Okay, so we'll take a short break here, about 10 minutes, let's say, and then we can do the next 10 questions. So we'll be back in 10 minutes.